All right, should be good to go, inshallah.
Oh, thank you, Hamna. I'm okay to start?
Yeah.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa kafa, wassalatu wassalamu ala ibadihi alladhina istafa, khususan minhum khatim al-anbiya wa khayr khalqillah wa ala alihi wal asfiya wal atqiya. Bismillah. Amma ba'd. So we left off yesterday in the second reason of seclusion, the legal dispensation following or allowing one to avoid the imams of fitna in the mosques. This is by in no way whatsoever to say that our imams are imams of fitna. Please don't get me wrong in that capacity at all. Rather, what this is saying is that there will come a time where our imams will be imams of fitna, and it has come before. The Banu Umayyah dynasty was a great example of it. And yesterday we went through in depth sort of this discussion about even our imams and all of us losing focus in our prayers, and why that's so problematic. Because in one hadith, the clear mentioning of this, the first of the things to leave the ummah and the final thing to leave the ummah will actually be the prayer itself. But sort of continuing today about with this discussion, then going on to the next chapter shortly thereafter. Where was I? Here we go. Abu Hamid al-Ghazali rahmatullahi alayhi, Imam al-Ghazali rahmatullahi alayhi, he mentioned a few different things regarding this. And he said that he mentioned that in his Minhaj al-Qasidin, or Minhaj al-Abidin, excuse me, Minhaj al-Qasidin is Ibn Qayyim, I believe. Where is it? Yeah, of Ibn Qayyim. In his Minhaj al-Abidin, Imam al-Ghazali rahmatullahi alayhi, he mentioned something very, very interesting. And that is this idea of, even when it comes to congregational prayers, and even wajib prayers like the Eid, and even fard prayers, that there may come a time in which a person has to move away. And he says specifically, whosoever is certain that the harms he will receive through mixing with people when attending the Friday prayer and the congregational prayers and Eids and so on are greater than the harms he will receive through leaving those things, then he will have a valid excuse in leaving them. Whilst in Mecca, Meccatul Mukarramah, I saw a Shaykh from the people of knowledge who had secluded himself and did not attend the sacred mosque for the congregational prayers, despite his proximity to it and despite the purity of his wealth. Meaning that he can get there, travel there, and there's no issue engaging in haram wealth. I spoke with him about that one day as I was visiting him, and he told me that the divine reward that he would find in attending the sacred mosque. What is that? That's 100,000 times reward for every prayer. That this reward that he would receive could not outweigh the sins and misdeeds he would accrue as a result of going to the mosque and meeting people. That is something that I can't put into words to express how profound, how scrupulous, and how refined of thought and experience that is. This is not a regular, this is a Shaykh from the people of ilm. And he was weighing the benefit and decided not to go into the haram to pray, to stay away from people. Now, again, this is not going to be at all times, but at his time that fitna had arisen. The point of bringing this up is that those times may come. And he mentions further, there's no blame upon one who is excused, and Allah knows best. So an individual at that time, when these fitan come up, we have to begin to actually recognize that saving the self even means sometimes moving away from Muslims. Doesn't mean that's the case now, but that time may arise. Now, someone might ask, and I can actually see people ask me, like, why are you even talking about this? The reason why I'm speaking about this is because people have come into positions where the fitna has been great, and they refuse to go to seclusion because they only heard the statements of the people that seclusion is not from our deen, or monasticism is not from our deen. The Prophet gave a very balanced approach to deen. And the same advice sometimes is not fit for two different people. You have to see in which condition you are in, and I have to see in which condition I am in. Then we have to seek the advice of the people who are learned and the people of experience, and then subsequently apply it. And I have actually, at one point in my time, remember that I was in a situation where I was even instructed by a scholar that you have to stay away from the congregational prayers at the masjid for one time. This was not in my when I was imam. This was before that. And so those times do arise. And when they arise, sometimes to make the decision by the self is not going to be good. Just like a person who learns about the importance of for example, a husband to serve the wife and do her khidmah in the household. And some might say, no, wives serve the husband. The Prophet served his family. And they might read this hadith and they might think, well, I shouldn't go to the masjid because my wife is tired. Let me just stay home with her. No, they have to have a balance and understand that we do things within the household, but at the same time, we go and pray at the masjid. So just like a person shouldn't jump to one extreme, they should also not jump to the other extreme either. There has to be a balance, and that balance is through knowledge that we figure all these things out. So Imam Ghazali himself says, this is his opinion, when tribulations begin to arise and matters become worse, and people turn away from the religion and do not observe the promises that they make, nor the bond of like the familial bond that exists between believers, and they do not seek out a person of knowledge or look for a person of benefit, nor does the religion help them in any way whatsoever, you will see fitna, tribulation, envelop the common people and advance rapidly within the ranks of the elect, meaning from the most basic person to the highest person it will go. When all these things occur, the person of knowledge is excused in withdrawing, isolating himself and burying knowledge. Even at that point, a person of ilm should just not worry about teaching, just take care of themselves. Now, if this was true then, can you imagine now what this means? Imam al-Ghazali made these statements 500 years, a little less than 500 years after the Prophet passed away. And then Shaykh Abdul Ghani al-Nabulusi, rahmatullahi alayhi, made these statements, mentioned this in his book, about 1100 years after the Prophet passed away. And so for us, we're 1400 years after the Prophet passes away, it becomes extremely, extremely important for us to be aware of this. Not because we're going to apply it, but if the situation does come where we have to apply it, then we do so. So he says we should know, dear brothers in faith, that the lawgiver, meaning the Prophet ﷺ, described the time when going seclusion would be necessary. And he also described its features and the features of its people and commanded that one should seclude himself. He was undoubtedly more knowledgeable of benefits than us, and pure in advice than we are to ourselves. Therefore, the time you find yourself is as the Prophet ﷺ has described and explained, then comply with his command and accept his sincere counsel. For there is no doubt whatsoever that he knows best what is to your benefit in your time. Do not make false excuses for the corruption of your age, and do not fool yourself, otherwise you will suffer ruin and have no valid excuse. And this is really the advice that we take from this chapter. That don't fool yourselves into thinking there's no problem, and don't fool yourselves into thinking that there is a problem. Go to the people of knowledge and recognize the Prophet gave this timeless advice. It's for all time, spans all generations. And if it happens to fit into our time, what should we do? We should accept this advice and subsequently act upon this advice. Now, what are some of the descriptions for this? Well, from them, we know the hadith of Abdullah bin Amr bin As, who said that once that he was sitting with the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ began to mention strife. And so he said, when you see people in that time when their contracts, meaning the promises they make, will be spoiled, and their trust will be worthless, and they will be like this. And he interlocked his fingers with his hands. So in that situation, what does he mention? I stood up in front of him and said, may Allah make me a sacrifice for you. What do you order for me to do when that time comes? He says, remain in your home, take control of your tongue, take what you recognize and refrain from that which you do not recognize, and tend to your personal affairs and leave the affairs of the general populace. And this is in the Jami' of Imam Tirmidhi, rahmatullahi alayh. And some of those characteristics do exist today. In another hadith of Ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma, and this is mentioned by Imam Tabrani rahmatullahi alayhi, that he said the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever seeks the affection of people through what they love and acts brazenly before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doing what he hates, he will find Allah angry with him when he meets him on the day of judgment. So why is this being mentioned? Because if you look at some of the things that are going to come up, this is some of the things that actually overcome scholars. And this is something that's going to be mentioned in another hadith coming forward. One of the hadith are coming right now, another one will come a little later, that the people of knowledge, or the people of position, I should say, because even in one of the narrations, it's going to mention that there'll be more orators, like there'll be speakers, people giving speeches, but not many scholars. Scholarship is a very specific, special term. There are a lot of people out there who can speak. I remember one time how old was I? This was 1998. So I was 17 years old. I was at a meeting that I had to go to. So I flew to a meeting for whatever, some organization. And when I was there, one of the advisors was saying, nowadays it doesn't take much to really be a speaker. All you have to do is you have to be able to quote some Arabic. You have to be able to raise your voice and lower your voice in the right capacity, and that's it. All of a sudden, people consider you to be a scholar. And I did not recognize how true that was. It's extremely true. It's extremely true that, if you're able to just, elevate your voice and lower your voice, and, you're able to quote some Arabic, people are like, oh, subhanAllah, Allama, how are you? They're willing to give bay'ah to you all of a sudden if need be. Everyone is so quick to assume. And this is what's funny. The true scholars, they stay quiet. That's actually the complaint that many people have. They say, well, we don't go to the scholars and listen to their talks because they don't give that many talks. They just teach, and they don't go give speeches. But we listen to these people in these different organizations because they give speeches and it motivates us. The scholars don't, in general, always give speeches. They don't always give speeches. And furthermore, they don't actually go out and seek people. They have pockets in which they teach, and people who are wise come to their pockets and begin to see, where can I sit and learn from this person? The emptiest, the most hollow pots make the most noise. And the pots that are filled, they often don't make noise. And you have to go to that pot to find its treasure. So anyway, another narration of Anas bin Malik radiallahu anhu, that he mentions that the Prophet said, during the last days, my nation will be divided into 3 groups. There'll be a group that worships Allah sincerely, a group that worships Allah for the sake of showing off, and a group that worships Allah for the sake of gaining some benefit for food from the people. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gathers them all on the day of judgment, he says to the one who sought food from others, by my might, what was your intention when you worshipped me? So they said, by your might and majesty, I worshipped you so that I might seek food from the people. Allah will say, what you amassed, what you gathered, the good deeds you did, will not help you at all. Then he'll order the angels, take him to the hellfire. Then Allah Ta'ala will say to the one who worshipped him sincerely, by my might and my majesty, for what purpose did you worship me? The person will say, by your might and your majesty, meaning he takes oath by this. You know my intention better than I do. I intended it for your countenance and remembrance, liwajhik, for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah will say, my servant has spoken the truth, take him to the garden. And so, this is in many ahadith, we see that Allah does not accept the deeds of those who have even the smallest intention of showing off within it. And so we have to be careful. We have to be careful, especially if you're in any leadership position or position of guidance. And if you want to know why, this next hadith will let us know why. Adi bin Hatim radiallahu anhu narrates that the Prophet ﷺ said, on the day of judgment, a group of people will be led to the garden. So they'll be taken to Jannah until they come very close and they smell its fragrance and they see the palaces and what Allah has promised for the people who are there, who receive it. Then a caller will call and say, tell them to leave. They are not going to get any of this. They will then have a lot of regret, far greater than anything experienced by anyone else. They'll say, oh Allah, if only you sent us to the fire before showing us paradise, it would have been much easier for us. Because now they saw paradise. They thought they would be able to attain paradise. And on top of that, they are beginning to see the reward that will be eternal. Allah Ta'ala will say, that is what I wanted for you all. When you were all alone, you would purposefully commit sins against me. But when you meet with people outside of your home, you would meet with them such a state of humility, showing off to them in a state that you did not have before me. You held people in awe, but did not hold me in awe. You gave people a position in your hearts that you did not give me in your heart. You rendered unto people what was due to them, but did not render to me what was due to me. Today I will make you taste the punishment, along with seeing the rewards denied to you. I mean, if we stop the whole conversation and just repeat the hadith for ourselves until the end of these 10 days, it still will not be enough. That is such a frightening hadith. It is such a frightening hadith. And so we have to recognize that these people, unfortunately, will come before the end of time. And we have to also recognize that we have to save ourselves from being in this category. If not, how sad is it to be shown the hellfire, then be put into shown the gates of paradise, and be put into hell just because around people we behave all, you know how people they act all modest and they like sort of turn their heads to the side and they're like, I'm nothing. If a person says I'm nothing, they think there's something, because so long as that term I is present, they think there's something. And there's such small ways that we often think things are due upon us. A person, I'll just take my example, because technically I'm a graduate from madrasa. I might be sitting in a gathering or khutbah and someone might be asked to give a talk, and it might come to my heart that, why wasn't I asked? That person didn't graduate, I graduated. Right there's an issue. A person might, go to a program and a talk's being given by a scholar, and they might think that, oh, I could have done a better job. There's an issue. A person might think, why am I not being asked? Why is this person that? There's an issue. These are things that we have to be careful of. And when this begins to proliferate and seep into the scholarly class, then this is what this chapter is saying. The rest of us, we need to now what? We need to seek refuge even from them and stay within our homes. And this is why for the people of knowledge, this is a warning against them. Because in essence, they will be the reason why we have to go now stay at home, because they're the ones who allow themselves to reach such a state that now we get harmed by them. Imam Tirmidhi rahmatullahi alayhi mentions that Abu Hurairah said the Prophet said, in the final days there shall appear men who acquire the world by means of the religion. So people will become wealthy off of religion. In front of the people, they'll wear the garments of the people of humility and the people of of simplicity, and their tongues will be sweeter than honey, but their hearts will be those of wolves. Allah will say, do they delude in my name? Do they act haughtily before me? I swear by my countenance, I will surely send a tribulation against them that will leave the forbearing among them bewildered. And so there's so much that's mentioned here, but sort of at this point it becomes important for us. Oh, subhanAllah, this hadith I should mention. Now the Prophet, it's in Tirmidhi as well, when the people of the Levant, you know what Levant is, like the Sham area where like ISIL or ISIS sort of started, unfortunately, when they become corrupt, then there's no good amongst you. There shall never cease to be a group from my nation that is victorious. They will not be harmed by those who forsake them until the final hour is established. So seeing this corruption now over there, and it's been there, not the people, but the leadership, yes. It makes us afraid that these hadith are coming to fruition. And the Prophet in another narration also in Tirmidhi mentioned, I fear not for my nation except what? Misguiding leaders. And so all of us have to now begin to, in another hadith, the Prophet mentions, the final hour not take place until time grows shorter, where a year will seem like a month will seem like a week will seem like a day will seem like an hour will seem like a flash in the pan. And that's exactly where we are today. When I was younger, the school year seemed long. To read summer break seemed like it took forever. Now, as a teacher, I'm finding summer break comes all the time. Things are flying. The Prophet predicted this. And why is this important for us to see that's happening in our times? Because he mentioned from amongst the things that happen towards the final hour, this is one of them. Another one of them is the growth of tribulation. And so at this time, we have to begin to really think, if these things are coming and I'm being harmed, this is, this is actually going to come in the next chapter, so I'm not going to mention it right now. But we'll see that withdrawing from society in some situations is actually preferable. And in general, my advice, stay away from gatherings in general that you don't have to go to. That's my advice. That's not what the book is saying. The book is actually saying much more than that. All these social gatherings, avoid them. Go only where necessary. Because even the social gatherings, there's ostentation, there's showing off, there's pride, there's hidden pride, there's false humility, there is abuse and useless spending of wealth. This is really growing now in the Muslim community amongst the practicing people. This is what's happening. It's almost like we have too much wealth for our own good now. We don't know what to do with it. And for some reason, we won't donate it. And we spend on these strange parties and all these things. It's funny. I would challenge everyone here to tell me how many parties, how many dawats did the Prophet ﷺ have in his life? How many parties did the Prophet ﷺ have in his life? How many gatherings did he come up with? Seriously, go look. Go look through hadith. I'm not saying be antisocial. I'm saying that this time is valuable. Don't waste it. How much did he spend? Iftar party after iftar party. All these gatherings that are being established. For what purpose? Why? Oh, brother, I miss people. I need to, in the next chapter, you'll see an amazing statement of Hazrat Uwais al-Qarni, rahmatullahi alayhi, regarding this. And so, anyway, this chapter is more of a warning. One moment. This chapter, in many ways, is more of a warning for the ulama, though. Because he says that there'll be a group of people from my nation, the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, whose scholars will pursue difficult questions, and they'll be the worst of my community. And another narration, there'll be men or people who from my nation who eat varieties of foods, drink a variety of drinks, and wear a variety of clothing, and they'll speak with affectation. They'll be the most evil of my nation. And if you look at these types of things, it exists today. The simplicity is gone. The simplicity and the purity is really beginning to go away. In one narration, it mentioned at the end of the days, there'll be didan al-qurra. In one interpretation of didan al-qurra, like the worms of the scholars. And what do worms do? They destroy things. Anyway, let's go on to the next chapter. Chapter 3. How were the early Muslims, the Salaf, during periods of corruption? Imam al-Ghazali rahmatullahi alayhi has mentioned that Sufyan al-Thawri rahmatullahi alayhi wrote to Abbad ibn Abbad al-Khawas and said, "You are in a time where the companions of the Prophet ﷺ used to seek the refuge in Allah from reaching. They had knowledge and virtue, which we do not possess. So how will our state be when we reach that period? Having little knowledge, meager patience, few helpers with what is good, and turbulence in the world and corruption amongst the people." Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anhu, he used to advise, remain aloof. Remaining aloof brings relief from bad company. Remaining aloof allows us to what? Save ourselves from bad company. In another narration, Sufyan al-Uyayna rahmatullahi alayhi, he mentions, I said to Sufyan al-Thawri, advise me. So Sufyan al-Thawri said, reduce your acquaintance with people. These are the Salaf. They're right within or right after Khair al-Qurun, the best generations. reduce your acquaintance with other people. I said, may Allah have mercy upon you. Wasn't it said in the report that increase your acquaintance with other people? For every believer has an intercession, meaning like if you meet the right people, eventually someone will intercede for you. And one moment. Should I go upstairs? Okay. Increase your acquaintance. And so then Sufyan al-Thawri said, as I see it, you will never experience things you dislike except from someone you know. So Sufyan al-Uyayna said, that's true. When he passed away, Sufyan al-Thawri, and Sufyan al-Uyayna saw him in a dream, he said, oh, Abu Abdullah, give me advice. So he said, reduce your acquaintance with other people, for being rid of them is difficult indeed. This is, I mean, gathering upon gathering, these things are just not found in the stories of the Salaf. I used to, there's something in Sham, I make a promise to myself, and I ask all of you to make a promise yourselves of this as well. That I remember I used to see one of our teachers in Zambia, Mufti Muhammad Sharif. At a time, he was more of acquaintance, and I had spent some time with him. I didn't get to study too much with him because I just studied in the summer with him, which was a lot, but I didn't get to do the school year with him. But his habit was anywhere he went, he would just keep books with him. He would go, he would arrive, he'd open the books, he would just read. Someone had to talk to him, he would answer the question, then he'd go back. And that's how even any parties, and he barely attended them anyway. So do that. We go to these gatherings, what happens? Backbiting happens. Wasting of time happens. Jealousy occurs because we see what we don't have. All these things occur. Grab a book, grab a Quran with you. Can you imagine if we put a percentage of time that we spend in these parties into memorizing Quran? All of us would be half of it right now. These are things that, if you look at the parties that were present on the Prophet, let's talk about the walimas. What would happen? A group of people would come, they would sit, they would eat, they would leave. Another group would come, they would sit, they would eat, they would leave. Because the home wasn't that big. Another group, maybe groups of 10 would come and eat and leave. In some narrations it mentions 10, so I'm mentioning that. In fact, if you look at one situation, this was his marriage to Zainab radiallahu anha. Hazrat al-Mu'mineen, Zainab radiallahu anha. When they sat down and they just hung out and they spoke, Allah rebuked that action in the Quran. When they just sat around hanging out, Allah sent verses against that in the Quran. So this is, we have to be extremely careful. Even in our gatherings of knowledge and progress, they've become like this as well. So we have to be very careful and selective. Let's go upstairs. In how we go to these gatherings. I mean, this is my intention, inshallah. If you see me at a gathering and I don't have a small pouch with a book or something, please call me out. I give you permission to do so, because then I'm not practicing what I need to practice. I have to hurry up. Sorry. Fudail bin Iyad rahmatullahi alayhi had said, in this age, look, he's from the Salaf, the earliest generations. You must guard your tongue, remain aloof from others, treat your heart, take what you recognize, and abstain from what you do not recognize. Remember one time I was giving a talk on the Ramadan of Mullah Zakaria rahmatullahi alayhi, and I was advised that, look, this is very difficult for people to reach. So maybe we should be careful. I was speaking to a scholar about this recently from a different state, from Michigan. We were talking about this. And so he said, when you say things like this, people can't reach it. I said, the reason I say this is so people to see that this is how the people before us looked at these moments, how they took care of their lives. And though we will never reach that, probably, we will at least have some hope that maybe I can come close to it. If I can't come close to it, at least I have a fikr to try to be like it. That's why I mention it. I don't mention it because I like to make myself feel bad about how far I'm away from people of greatness. No, it's rather to see this is how they were. I have fallen short. How can I now push myself to try to reach the what they had done? Now, look, I'm going to mention another thing very, very clearly. This is not for everyone. This is not for everyone. I don't want people to think that you can't go into gatherings. No, you can. What I am saying is that don't waste time. You want to go into a gathering and sit with people and enjoy their company? Go ahead and do that. But for how long? You go to a gathering on Friday night. People come after Maghrib. Then you sit for 2 hours. Okay, like what more is there to do? Okay, 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours. Like how much more? After a certain point, a person just recognizes that we need to go home. And what's the easiest way? Speaking to one of my teachers who said, the Prophet had encouraged us to eat very little. He said, eat little, such that we fill 1/7 of our stomach, or that we eat only a couple bites just to keep ourselves straight. This one third, that's an extreme within our deen. But he said nowadays you can't teach people that, because if you try, people will be unable to do so. So just teach them to eat halal and tayyib. So I will say what I expect from everyone. Go ahead, go to the gatherings, because my words aren't going to stop anyone anyway. They won't even stop me. So it's not going to really stop anyone anyway. I know I'm not going to be able to change anyone's minds on that. So go to your parties, whatever. Make sure there's no violation of Sharia. Okay? That's number one. Should not be a mixed gathering. Should not be a gathering with music. None of these things should be happening. Okay? It should just be a good gathering. Secondly, when you're there, make sure you don't backbite. Okay? That's simple enough. Make sure you don't backbite. No slandering, no lying. Thirdly, if a person begins to feel the traces of jealousy that, oh, look at this person's house, I don't have any of this, then it's better to sit down for a moment, do shukr and istighfar, and make an excuse and pardon yourself and leave, so that doesn't seep into the heart more. Fourthly, guard the prayer time. So everyone should pray on time, preferably in the masjid. Fifth, if a person is now there and it's getting late, think, how will I pray tahajjud? Or how will I pray fajr? And if those things are coming to question, then we know where they're way too late. Okay? And then sixth, what I personally feel is that guard against the evil eye. So don't overly, make yourself so beautified that everyone's looking and giving evil eye at that moment. Just be normal. If it's a good party, dress in a good way. If it's a fancy party, dress in a relatively fancy way. At the same time, have some concern for the self and for the children. Because I know people aren't going to do this. The purpose of this is to show that time will come. And at that time, we shouldn't say, no, I'm not going to do that. At that time, we say we should do that. This is not for now. We're not at that time yet. Getting close. We're not at that time yet. I look at some of my teachers, even in America, some of my teachers, and I'm just astounded by their ability to avoid gatherings. And then when they're in gatherings, that they're able to just spend that time wisely and leave. And I wish I had that ability. I don't. I fall short in it. Dawood al-Ta'i, rahmatullah alayhi, said, fast from the world and break your fast in the hereafter, and flee from the people as you would flee from a lion. Again, you don't have to run away from gatherings, but just be balanced in it. Party Friday night, party Saturday night, and party Sunday afternoon. That's the weekend. Then Monday through Friday work. Then party again Friday night. Then then Saturday late morning brunch with the friends. And then Saturday, a late afternoon party. Then Saturday night, basketball. Then Sunday, we need to go do this and this with certain people. And the family's suffering because there's no family time. The spouse is suffering because there's no attention towards the spouse. This is not healthy. This is not healthy. And so we are very, very careful that we stay away from these things. Okay. So anyway, it's 9:50. So I'm going to get going, inshallah. And now I feel bad doing this. Maybe we should just delete this Hamza from the online. I think maybe we should delete. Let's talk about deleting this from the. By this I mean this whole 10 days. I think this might be too much for people. I have to finish off this chapter tomorrow. I'm very close to finishing it off, and then chapter the fourth, how the early imams would withdraw from society. We'll cover that tomorrow. If we for some reason don't finish it tomorrow, we'll finish it on Thursday, which is the final night anyway. Inshallah, we'll finish it both tomorrow. Now I feel depressed. I think I put upon people things that they're not ready to hear. So my apologies. See, I told you, Hamza, should have done the Akabir of Deoband. Easy. Everyone gets happy about that, and everyone's smiling, and then everyone can go have a good dinner afterwards. Okay. Spend a few minutes doing. First, let's recite some Quran. So whatever position or place you are in Quran, you should go ahead, open to that page of Quran and start reciting. I'm trying to see what page I'm on. Oh, there it is. Okay, so the next thing is go ahead and pray 2 rak'ah, and then we'll make dua, inshallah. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى ال سيدنا محمد بارك وسلم. ربنا اتنا في الدنيا حسنه وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. اللهم اغفر لنا وارحمنا وأنت خير الراحمين. Oh Allah, I ask your forgiveness, Ya Allah, for being hard upon the people, Ya Allah. Oh Allah, guide me and guide all of us to treat one another in a way that is light and easy upon one another without watering down the deen or making the deen too easy, Ya Allah. Allah, we ask, Ya Allah, for guidance on how to treat one another and how to be with one another, Ya Allah. Allah, I ask your forgiveness, Ya Allah, for representing Islam in a way that it is not necessarily meant to be, Ya Allah. Allah, we ask, Ya Allah, that you please allow Fatima Shafiq, Ya Allah, to be extubated, Ya Allah, with ease and allow her to gain her beating on her own, Ya Allah. Allah, save her from any difficulty with the tube in her body, Ya Allah. Allah, we ask that you forgive and grant maghfirah to the father of Khalid, Saifullah, and Umar, Abdullah, and Hamid Sibghatullah, Ya Allah. Allah, we ask that you grant full recovery to the father-in-law of Brother Abdul, Ya Allah, and full recovery to the father-in-law of Brother Omar Arshad, Ya Allah, and that you grant full recovery to Brother Amir Ahmed, Ya Allah. And Allah, we ask, Ya Allah, that you please bless all of those, Ya Allah, who are sick, and forgive all those who have passed away, Ya Allah. Sallallahu ala khayri khalqihi Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in bi rahmatika.